All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate your patience as we got started. My name is Carlos Medina, Learning Services Manager at San Diego Grantmakers, and I'm going to welcome you today to Philanthropy California's webinar, Market Rate Impact Investing. And I just want to start off with a few housekeeping elements for today's presentation. First off, I wanted to let folks know that we are welcoming questions throughout the course of this presentation, and we'll do our best to interweave them through today's conversation. So we encourage you to add your questions in the chat box you'll find located at the bottom of your screen. Secondly, I wanted to share with everyone that we will be recording today's webinar, and just want to make sure that all participants are apprised of that detail. And also, towards the end of the webinar, we will share an evaluation poll. And we appreciate your support by completing this poll because it will provide us valuable feedback that we can use to improve future programming. Now, we have a lot of great content and speakers for you today. So with those details out of the way, I'd like to introduce San Diego Grantmakers President and CEO, Debbie Mckeon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carlos. And welcome, everyone. We are so excited to be here today. On behalf of Philanthropy California, I just want to thank all of you for joining us. We know schedules are crazy, but it's incredibly important, the topic that we're going to talk about today. And so thank you for making time to be here with us. Philanthropy California, as many of you know, because you're our members, but for those who are joining us that may not yet be aware, Philanthropy California is one of the nation's largest collaborations of funders, and it includes the entire networks of Northern California Grantmakers, Southern California Grantmakers, and San Diego Grantmakers. And we've got a core belief that through collaboration and shared learning with peers, that we can provide resources that fuel the work to create a better future for California. I'm incredibly proud to be with you today to share with you in this historic moment for our networks and for impact investing in the state of California. Today, we're incredibly pleased to announce the launch of the Philanthropy California Impact Investing Collaborative, which has already seen over $70 million in capital dedicated to make sound investments to benefit California's underserved communities. Today, you're going to hear from leading Philanthropy California member foundations, a public sector partner, and advisors, all of whom are leaders in creating the investments that were utilized to launch Investing for Impact. And they're going to talk about the tools that they're using to activate their investment portfolios for impact across all of the underserved communities in California. But first, I'd like to share a message from Kathleen Kelly-Janis, the Senior Advisor on Social Innovation in the Governor's Office, who's a steadfast partner with us here in Philanthropy California, and who unfortunately could not be with us here today because she's hosting another meeting that is a partnership between Philanthropy California and the Governor's Office. But with that, I'd like to turn it over for a quick video remarks from Kathleen.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Kelly-Janis, Senior Advisor on Social Innovation to Governor Newsom. And on behalf of the Governor's Office, I just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work to advance California, and especially for the leadership investments in California that you'll be talking about today. This is the first Philanthropy California Impact Investing Program, and today features the Philanthropy California Investment Collaborative that supports small business development and affordable housing, two huge priorities for our office. Philanthropy California is a tremendous collaborator with our work, and from partnering to coordinate the COVID-19 funding throughout the state to wildfire disaster funding, which is so important today, we're working together to meet the urgent needs of Californians, because our office realizes that we cannot do this alone, that we must work together with philanthropy and with business to address our most pressing problems. Today, I am so proud to be able to participate, albeit virtually, as you set out on another important milestone, advancing the practice of impact investing in our state. So as you know, the governor's office cares deeply about inclusion, and we work hard to ensure that we're reaching all Californians in our California for All agenda. The Impact Investing Collaborative that you all have set up highlights investment opportunities toward these goals, driving investment into the communities that really need it most. So congratulations on the over $70 million in investment capital to kick off this Philanthropy Collaborative. And it really speaks to the incredible leadership of your members and the bold innovation of your work. As we work toward our recovery from wildfires and economic and public health shocks like the pandemic, initiatives like these give me so much hope because they demonstrate that we have courage and fortitude and commitment to building a better California. So thank you. We applaud your work with this initiative and look forward to your continued partnerships with Philanthropy California and its members. Have a wonderful convening, and I really look forward to the day when we can all get together again in person.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as Kathleen mentioned, we've got tremendous momentum with Philanthropy California and in our partnerships with the governor's office. And we're incredibly thankful for the bold leadership of our members of Philanthropy California, advancing a new additive strategy for impact here in California. But now, enough of the opening comments. I want to turn it over for the deep content-rich conversations today. So please allow me to introduce one of our key partners in this initiative, and also my very good friend, Catherine Bernat from RBC Global Asset Management. Catherine.
Thank you, Debbie. You have been an inspiring partner, and it's a privilege to work with you and with your fabulous team. So thank you. And welcome, everyone. For a long time, I have traversed the country with a vision for impact investing. While I call myself a banker, my friends often think of me as an impact investing evangelist. That's how I met Debbie Mckeon and what brings us all here today. I believe in harnessing capital markets and that they can drive societal change. It's absolutely possible to earn a market rate of return and meet fiduciary responsibilities while at the same time generating measurable societal impact. And we've been doing that at RBC and through our strategies for over 2 decades. From climate change to homelessness to COVID recovery, my colleagues and I at RBC believe in the power of aligning market rate investments with your values. And all of our panelists today are going to share their thoughts on this subject with us as well. We recognize that one of the most powerful ways to innovate, to create durable change, is through collaboration. That's why we're here today, to support collaboration with some of the best and brightest foundations in the world. What you have all achieved in forming Philanthropy California's Impact Investing Collaborative is actually a real landmark for the impact investment movement. You've collectively joined to represent the largest group of grant makers in the US. And with that size comes the ability to have a greater impact in California. Philanthropy California provides concrete solutions, and we at RBC are really proud to be one of them. Your leadership is being recognized throughout the country, as is evidenced by the fact that today's attendees include people from Texas and Chicago and Pennsylvania, to name just a few. We want to thank all of you for joining us wherever you are as we discuss investing, impact investing, and how to help California. And on that note, I am honored to have with me today 2 clients that are tremendous leaders in the impact investing field. Rosa Benitez from the Weinbart Foundation and Mark Doherty from the San Francisco Foundation. Welcome, Rosa and Mark. Thank you. I thought we'd start out, Rosa and Mark, with some personal introductions. A little bit about yourself, why you do what you do, because that is so important in the work we are all passionate about. A little bit about the organization and about the mission of your foundation. Rosa, could you start for us?
Sure, happy to. I just want to first thank Philanthropy California as well as RBC for inviting us to participate. We're certainly still in our own learning journey around impact investing, so happy to kind of share our perspective. Just on a personal note, I grew up in Southern California, come from immigrant family, parents, and so part of what drew me to Weingart was the mission of the foundation around supporting some of the things that I had experienced as a young individual. I have been with the foundation for 12 years. I am the director of program investments at the foundation. I primarily oversee our program-related investment fund, and as well as work with our CFO on our impact investing work. In terms of the foundation, so we're based in Los Angeles and funded in 5 counties within Southern California. Our mission is to advance racial, social, and economic justice in Southern California, and we really seek to achieve inclusion and opportunity for those that have been historically excluded and those facing the greatest barriers to equity. And so our overall vision is really to create an equitable system and structures needed to achieve justice.
Thank you, Rosa, and thanks for all that you and the foundation do. Mark, can you talk about yourself and San Francisco Foundation and all the fabulous things you're all involved with?
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine, and thank you, and again, echoing Rosa's voice of gratitude for including me in this conversation. So I really look forward to today's dialogue. So again, my name is Mark Doherty. I'm the Director of Investments for the San Francisco Foundation. And maybe a little bit about me and how I got into this space. I used to be, many years ago, chapters of my lives ago, in banking, private banking, corporate banking, and then moved into the philanthropic sector probably about a decade ago. And I think one of the things that really sort of opened my eyes quite some time ago was the inequity of wealth around where I live in the Bay Area. And I heard in your introductory comments, Catherine, that there are people across the country. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Bay Area, where I live in the San Francisco Peninsula area, there's a couple of towns that border each other, and they're near where I live. And the net worth delta between those two communities is 100 times. So that is to say, the town that is bordering another town has literally 100 times greater net worth of its residents. And so that is literally just a little bit of a benchmark of the inequity of the greater Bay Area. So I got into this sector, as I said, about a decade ago, and I've been working with San Francisco Community Foundation for the past couple of years. The San Francisco Foundation was started in 1948, and in 2014, we hired a new CEO, Fred Blackwell, who really wanted to modernize the mission of the foundation to the 21st century. So he went about and listened to the communities in the 5 counties that we serve in the Bay Area, and he asked the question of, what are the most pressing challenges for you that you want foundations to help? And I think very similar to what Rosa was speaking to, the answer time and again was that the communities that we are servicing are really burdened down by racial inequity and economic exclusiveness. And that is to say that people really don't feel that they're a part of the growing wealth of the Bay Area. So I guess it's always interesting for me to try and put perspective around this for people, is what is sort of our reality in the Bay Area versus what we're trying to shoot for. And the example I like to talk about is, if a married couple is just earning minimum wage in the Bay Area, that is a living minimum wage, and you only want to have 30% of your income go to rent, and you want to rent an apartment in the Bay Area, there's only 5% of apartments that you could then afford. Example of what we're really trying to grapple up against and work towards. So our mission is really what we call our equity agenda, where we're trying to have systemic change to have everyone in the Bay Area be able to have an opportunity to go to a good school, live in a house that they can afford, have a job which they can commute that is a reasonable amount of time to go to and commuting, and also have a strong political voice. But I think it's also important, especially for this audience, to remember, this isn't just a social or moral value issue that we're talking about. This is also an economic one. There was a report that came out from Citibank last week that some of the folks on this call might have read, where it said that over the past 20 years, due to anti-Black racist policies in the country, the US economy has lost 16 trillion of GDP. So that's 16 with a T, trillion. So that is a significant amount of money that is being lost to our racist policies that we have embedded in the way that we lend, the way that we promote businesses. So my role in the foundation, as I say, is overseeing our investments. We have, as a community foundation, we have donor advised funds and we have our endowment. And our donors have 3 different options that they have available to them: a long-term pool, a short-term pool, and then we have a mission-aligned strategy as well as our PRI strategy. And it's the latter 2 pools of capital that are really applicable because we hold RBC investments in each of those strategies.
Thank you, Mark. So the 3 of us in our own ways have been on this journey of your path to impact investing together. And I wonder if you'd share a little bit about the story of how your foundation decided to begin impact investing and really what was driving that. Rosa, would you like to kick that off?
Sure, I'm happy to share. I would say that we're still relatively new to impact investing, and the pivotal point that led us towards this path for the foundation was really in 2016. When Weingart made a full and long-term commitment to equity. And what this meant for us is that we were going to align all of our policies and practices, essentially everything that we do throughout the foundation, with our mission of racial equity and socioeconomic justice. And internally, we kind of coined this, that we were going all in on equity. And so that was kind of what was driving, our work, since 2016. And certainly on the grant making side, they were already moving towards this direction. But what this commitment also meant was that it extended to the management of our investment portfolio. And one of the bold decisions that our board made with this commitment is that they decided to holistically integrate mission-aligned investing, impact investing across the entire portfolio. So not necessarily just allocate a specific carve-out, but really look at working towards aligning 100% of our investments with our mission and values. And like I shared, we're still very early in the stage of implementation, having only started making impact investments about 2 years ago. We know this is going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a considerable amount of time, but we're really trying to take an incremental approach to this work.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you to the Weingart for really taking what is really a courageous move to advance to look at the entire corpus. And certainly in my experience, when I started 6 years ago at RBC, it was less easy to do that across the whole portfolio, but I'm sure some of the other panelists will discuss that more later about how that is possible today. Mark, I think you had a slightly different journey to impact investing, but not totally dissimilar. Do you want to talk about yours as an institution and perhaps even as you, Mark Doherty, as well?
Well, I think people will be much more interested to hear about the foundation's path than my personal one. There's a lot more capital to bear for the foundation. So the foundation started actually in impact investing quite a long time ago. It started with loan guarantees back in 1989, where it took 1% of its endowment and provided loan guarantees to local organizations. And it was really just a pioneering moment of dipping its toe into this idea of trying to put as much of its capital to the community as possible. You fast forward to 2000, and that's when the foundation at that time created an SRI strategy for our donor advised pool. So it was literally just a mutual fund that was a socially screened strategy and we wanted to have something that was available for our donors, and that was in 2000. And then in 2009, the foundation decided to get a little bit more serious into its PRI strategy, and it committed $5 million of its endowment towards making loans to organizations in the Bay Area. That was backed up in 2018 by another 10 million. So we have about $15 million of our endowment that's been allocated into our PRI strategy, and we have an additional $8 million of donor dollars that have been invested alongside of us in making loans and investments in our PRI program. And going back onto the MRI side, that was really kicked off just before I started in 2017. The board really just started asking questions. You know, it was obviously something that was much more of a point of discussion. Consultants were talking about it much more. Conferences were speaking much more around impact investing, and it has shifted away from being sort of this, you know, far left, you know, liberal strategy to being a little bit more of a like intentional allocation of capital. And so the board said, you know, let's figure this out, and how do we want to get engaged? And it took a couple of years to build the process, but we launched our program in 2019 with $50 million of our endowment, and we've gotten about $25 million of donor capital that's come alongside with us. But I think to Rosa's point, you know, we're still working to, you know, understand how we can broaden that lens across the broader core of our capital. But it is, you know, right now our MRI is a broadly diversified sort of equity, fixed income, venture portfolio.
And I'll let you raise your hand, each of you, as to who wants to answer this question first. We are seeing a great deal more momentum behind impact investing. It really since March, when COVID became such a challenge. And what we see it as is an urgency to try to, as the sort of the grant dollars become less and less sufficient, or more and more taxed, and you know, and the problems or the issues you're trying to support are becoming more and more challenging, to use impact investing as sort of another tool in the toolkit. Do you have thoughts about that within your organizations? Are there either conversations you're having internally or externally or around some of those themes?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump on. I think it's definitely something that was one of the drivers for why we even began doing mission-related investing, is to the point that you were raising, Catherine, that, you know, even before COVID, you know, we viewed as a foundation that the challenges that we're trying to resolve are so large and so systemically rooted that we can't just resolve them through grants. And we need to be utilizing every arrow that we have in our quiver, tool in your toolbox, whichever metaphor you want to utilize. But we really wanted to make sure that we were intentionally trying to do everything we could do. And so that includes, you know, working around with our grants, making sure that those are aligned, obviously, with our investments, being as supportive as we can, and doing a lot of work on the policy side, like in California in our capital in Sacramento, trying to affect change there.
Rosa, any additional comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree. I think certainly given, you know, the onset of COVID, you know, we were already in this journey. I think, you know, one of the things that we're really trying to think about is how can we lean in, you know, and really use, you know, our grant making, our PRIs, MRIs, and even maybe some other kind of non-monetary tools that the foundation has to really support, you know, our communities of priority. So.
Both the Weingart Foundation and the San Francisco Foundation, different as you are, share a dedication to California. And certainly California is facing its own challenges along with everybody else these days. Is there a particular focus that is important to your foundation at this point? How do you prioritize all the things that you're trying to do, and you know, perhaps a little bit of a shout out to the benefits of collaboration and more people adding their dollars or their interests to align with yours.
Yeah, I would just share, as a foundation, we've had a long history of, helping to support and strengthen nonprofit capacity and effectiveness. We started in, 2008 with the prior, with the recession, to really kind of increase our commitment to providing unrestricted, multi-year unrestricted dollars to organizations. We've also had a longstanding commitment around housing and homelessness, immigration, and more recently, youth organizing, leadership development for movement builders. And then, given kind of our commitment around racial equity and social economic justice, really thinking about how can we support efforts to build power and to organize for systemic change that are impacting the communities of color that are of great interest in our geographic priority. So we're just, we're increasing our commitments to all of those areas, some that are longstanding and then some are more relatively kind of identified areas.
Mark, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the outset, our mission, we call it the Equity Agenda, and it's advancing, I think, similar to Rosa, communities that have greater racial inclusion and economic equity. And when COVID hit, we really started off, like many other foundations, around relief. We triggered a lot of emergency relief funds. We opened up some money that had been sort of earmarked out of our endowment for that. We had a ton of money that came in via contributions from individuals and corporations that was really focused around trying to help in this moment of crisis. And then you fast forward to George Floyd's murder, and that's when everything pivoted yet again. And the focus became even sharper for us as an organization, where we're really trying to help communities reimagine themselves and rebuild. And to do so in a way, to your point about collaboration, this is something that, again, is going to take more dollars than an individual foundation can do. It requires the balance of policy and grant making and investments to affect that change. And we've been on this path as an organization for about 5-6 years now, and we feel we're sort of purpose built for this moment. And we're helping a lot of other foundations who are trying to get, sort of up the learning curve about, like, how do I even do this? What does it mean to be an impact investor? Or how do I invest with diverse managers? Or, any of the things that we have made sort of part and parcel of our business. I think for us, it was our largest fundraising year, and it was our largest grant making year. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that that's probably representative for a lot of other foundations and their experiences across the board this year, sadly.
So, I describe myself as an impact investing evangelist. And I think one of my greatest personal frustrations is it seems sort of obvious to me that if you can earn the same return with impact or earn the same return without impact, why wouldn't you always choose the former? Any thoughts on what the resistance points are to doing that? Do you think it's lack of information? Do you think it's, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. I'll leave it to you guys to comment.
I mean, I would say for Weingart, I would say we didn't necessarily, there wasn't a lot of resistance per se, but certainly the concern around, if we start doing impact investing, does that mean that we would accept concessionary returns, right? And if that was the case, are we going to be able to sustain our grant making? And I think through our learning journey, what we, were really confident about was that we could find opportunities to invest that were going to be generating a market rate return. So we were really confident about that. And so it essentially wasn't an issue. And when we think about kind of, using the different tools at our disposal to kind of achieve our mission, I think that we were, open to taking a look at a new area like impact investing.
Mark, you talk about having been a banker in a previous life. Do we think that that you can achieve a competitive return? I think that's certainly your experience, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I would agree with you, and I do echo Rosa's point to answer the question about what are the concerns, right? I think it's definitely a reasonable point of concern of a board member or a committee member to say, you know, I'm a fiduciary on behalf of this organization, and I want to make sure that I'm doing a prudent decision here in hiring an investment manager or a fund. And that's clearly going to be one of the questions that they have is, you know, are we going to be getting market rate returns? Are we going to be able to hit our spending policy? All of which are very reasonable things to be asking questions about. I think for us, you know, we have looked at impact investing in a variety of ways, and you know, bear with me as we sort of walk through it. You know, specifically in our PRI program, you know, we obviously are using that pool of capital to make loans to nonprofit organizations. But in the meantime, while we're finding organizations to lend to, we have a pile of capital that's undeployed, as we say, and we had previously just had it invested in a short duration fixed income vehicle that was not an impact strategy at all. And after I came on board, that was one of the things that we looked at was how could we make this capital be more intentionally aligned with what we're doing in our PRI program. And I think that, you know, the strategy that we have, for example, with, you know, in our PRI program, definitely is providing us with liquidity, is providing us with high corporate quality and its credit quality. And it's helping us from a return perspective. Really, our goal there is to realize sort of a net of fees 2%. And if we're lending out in concessionary rate all the time, then having investments that are generating market rate returns on my fixed income portfolio is really a wonderful complement to that, you know, targeted return. I think on the broader capital that we have outside of the PRI program, you know, the foundation considers ESG strategy, ESG considerations across all of our investments. We've told our managers that we don't want them to be investing in predatory lenders or private prisons, and that's inside and outside of our MRI strategy. It's across the whole $1.5 billion that we have. And within our MRI strategy, we obviously have some additional screens there. But I think for us, one of the unintended benefits that we had when we created our MRI program was we went out and we spoke to our separately managed account managers, and we asked them, hey, would you be willing to invest in alignment with these same screens and these same principles? And they all said yes. And so when you think of the $1.5 billion that we have of overall capital, it's around 40 to 45% of the overall pie that is actually invested in alignment with the investment policy statement of our MRI pool, right? So I think it's an example of, you know, really being able to cast a broader net, generating those market rate returns that Rosa was alluding to, while supporting the broader mission and spending policy challenges. And I'm sure that, you know, the next panel is going to speak to the challenges of the current state economy. You know, when, you know, forecasted expected returns are coming down slightly, spending policy is, you know, on the rise. People want to get more money out the door. So how do you square that circle, right? I mean, that is a constant challenge for us.
So we've heard a lot about the suffering, the issues, the strains on small businesses. And we at RBC help both of you invest in small businesses in the areas that you sort of call your zone of influence, perhaps. Can you give us some other examples of things that you're doing in your impact investing that may be of interest, or perhaps specific things along the lines of small businesses, or even some of the things you're doing in your loan guarantee programs? I know both also Weingart is doing some loan guarantees.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, you know, when we looked at priorities around our impact investing work, there was two priorities that we identified: economic and community empowerment. You know, really wanting to increase access to capital, you know, economic inclusion, but also looked at areas around diversity and inclusion, specifically related to diversifying the pool of fund managers, as well as just trying to really increase access for capital for entrepreneurs that are women as well as people of color. So those are some of the things that we really are trying to, kind of make some traction, and we've made some investments in those areas. And it's, a little bit too soon for us to really tell kind of what that impact has, whether those investments have made impact in those areas, but we're, very open to the idea and really excited about the prospect.
We're going to we're going to have a consultant panel after this. Any thoughts on the importance of the consultant in your process as a setup for that? Then we have a very interesting question in front of us that I'm going to go to from the audience.
Yeah, I'll speak to the question about the consultants. I mean, I think for us, we work with a consultant. It was an integral piece of the process for us, both in the investments within our PRI program, as well as obviously within our core and our MRI strategy, really helping to put the bones around that initiative. So I think, as with any of our investment decisions, our investment committee, our MRI subcommittee that had been working on structuring the portfolio, really turned to the consultant for the expertise and the guidance and saying, hey, help us walk through this door together. And I think, again, it's, one of the things that I would suggest to the audience is that, you don't want to create a process that is different and apart from your core approach to doing things. I think it's important for your board, your committees to feel like this is core and incumbent upon what we do as an organization. And this isn't just sort of a one-off satellite project that we're going to do over here, spend a little time upon, and maybe have a different approval process to it or a different decision tree than we're accustomed to, because it then heightens that concern again that the board members, committee, fiduciaries would have. Whereas I think it brings comfort and reassurance that the same way that we make our decisions in our core strategy is the same things that we're going through for our impact investment portfolios. So they were, I think, very instrumental, and I know that Wendy's going to speak to that as well. I think it's a really important piece.
Rosa, any additional thoughts to that? Or?
Yeah, I would just say consultants did play a role, certainly in our, early work. We hired Avivar Capital, who is based in LA. They really helped to educate the foundation as well as our board about what is impact investing, what are other foundations doing, what might this look like for Weingart. And so they were really instrumental in being able to do that. And then we certainly, one of the things, I think one of the critical things that happened in our journey is that, we had to ask ourselves, once we made the commitment to move forward with impact investing, had to ask ourselves, do we have the right resources in place? One of the things that we had to look at was, did we have the right investment advisors? And the answer, unfortunately, was no. And so we had to do an RFP, and we brought on Cambridge, and Cambridge has been super instrumental in helping us move forward with this journey. And so, we continue to work with them, and they've been doing great work for us.
So there's a question from the audience, which is, does Philanthropy California's collaborative have a target amount to raise for investment in California through the RBC investment vehicles? And I'm going to throw that to Mark, because he talked about a $16 trillion gap. So, because of racial inequity in this country. So I don't think we have a target, but do you have thoughts? I guess the real question that I would throw out is, how much money do you think we need to move the needle?
Well, I would definitely say that the amounts of money that any of the institutions individually are going to be able to put into these strategies is going to be insufficient. And that's the strength of the collaborative, right? And collaboration efforts and raising just the awareness of this. And so I think for me, it's really wanting to heighten, something that you've sort of been touching through in this conversation is that, all organizations have the requirement of generating market rate returns. If they're a community foundation or an organization that's focused specifically within California, there are investment solutions that allow you to tailor it and restrict it to your geography, right? So for our PRI programs investment with RBC, that's specifically in the 5 counties of the Bay Area. And then within my mission-related investment strategy, the investment we have with RBC, that is across the whole of California. So for me, it's a great way to reinforce the Community Foundation's ambition of really strengthening our local communities, right? And so I think, is there a target? I don't have one myself. It's always N+1 in that regard. You always have to get more. But I do think that, you know, one of my ambitions from participating in this is just trying to have the audience understand that, you know, there are people available as resources to try and help others, you know, along the way. And I think Rosa mentioned that in her opening comments, that, you know, we're all sort of building this along as we go. And so it's been wonderful, you know, the collaborative process that you find within the philanthropic sector.
Thank you. Rosa, anything to add?
You know, I think what I would just add about the collaborative, or the importance of the collaborative, is the potential around expanding impact investing, the practice within California, and really having an opportunity to learn, have some peer learning with other like-minded investors to really create impact. So that's where I kind of see the real potential and value related to the collaborative.
So a quick wrap-up question. So thank you for supporting Philanthropy California. We believe that collaborations of this sort can be very powerful. If you had one message for the audience about investing in California and in Philanthropy California, what would it be as a parting thought?
I mean, I would say, at least, you know, we've seen that there's like a lot of emerging opportunities in California, especially given recent events. And so, you know, I think joining the collaborative would provide the opportunity to really dig deeper, learn, and then really leverage our resources with one another.
Mark?
Yeah, Catherine, I think I would say that in this time of sort of multifaceted crises and such a moment of volatile markets and almost zero interest rates from the Fed, that investors and organizations can invest locally. They can generate local social impact, positive contributions to their community, all while generating market returns.
Thank you. No, I actually wasn't going to answer this question, but going back to the question about how much do we hope to raise, I think what we really would love is not only for the dollars to grow, but really for the number of participants to grow. Because the more people you bring together, the more ideas you bring into the conversation, the more collaboration and the more sharing. And one of the things we've talked about is having an ongoing convening of people to share information and ideas and investment thoughts, how we can all get this to be better and better. So I think participation is really important. I'm getting questions, but I also think I'm supposed to pass it on. So I'm looking for a cue from somebody. What I actually think is we've had some incredible questions. And what I'd like to suggest, in the interest of respecting everyone's time, what we will do is, as part of the follow-up, we will get answers to everybody's questions and share that with the audience as soon as possible. We often say at RBC that it's about direction, not perfection. And in the interest of respecting that and understanding that we can't be perfect in a pandemic world, my colleague Mike Poremba has only been able to join us on the phone. He is the host of the next panel. He is a great colleague and an extraordinary partner. And with that, I'll pass it to Mike Poremba, who will come as the disembodied voice from the beyond.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for the kind words. And I just want to do a quick sound check. Can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you a little light. I don't know about the rest of the team.
Okay. I'll move a little closer to my phone and talk a little bit louder. But thanks again.
Even a
Catherine,
little
for the
bit
kind
more on
words.
both those fronts, Mike, would be good.
Okay. How about now, Catherine? Is that better?
A little bit.
A little bit.
There you go.
I can't get it. Okay, we'll go with this. All right. Well, thanks again, Catherine, and apologies for that little hiccup, everyone. As Catherine mentioned, I'm a member of the consultant relations team at RBC, and I'm based in Los Angeles. And I have the pleasure of working with and introducing our two consultant panelists. First, we have Wendy Walker, who is a managing director at Cambridge Associates, and Wendy is based in San Francisco. And to the south of me is Ted Benedict. He's a managing principal at Mckeon and based down in Carlsbad. So thank you both, Wendy and Ted, for your support of the collaborative, and appreciate your enthusiasm in participating in this call. I know when we approached you, the response was yes, pick the date, and we will be there. So we are here, and thanks again. And for the grant makers, I wanted to thank them for having the consultant panel on this webinar. I want to echo the sentiment from Mark expressed earlier. It's so important to have multiple partners involved. And of course, that is consistent with the mission of the grant makers. So our plan was to have questions from the audience, but as Catherine said, in the interest of time, we can address those later. But I want to start the conversation off with introducing Mckeon and Cambridge to those who may not know about Mckeon and Cambridge, and learn about their approach to impact and sustainable investing. So Wendy, why don't we start with you, and then we'll have Ted follow. If you wouldn't mind introducing your organization and yourself, and we'll turn it over to Ted afterward.
Super, happy to. Hi everybody. As Mike mentioned, I'm based in Cambridge Associates San Francisco office. I initially moved to the Bay Area to earn my MBA at UC Berkeley, go Bears, and I now consider myself a proud Californian after more of a decade here in the state. And some of you may know that Cambridge Associates is a global investing firm. We have offices on 4 continents, and we have over 400 billion in assets under advisement and over 40 billion in discretionary assets under management. Now, my own clients represent just a tiny percentage of those totals, but I consider it a privilege to be able to tap into our research platform and our other initiatives that support the much larger client base. I personally work with exclusively with endowments and foundation clients on both an advisory and a discretionary basis, and I build mission-driven portfolios across all asset classes, and I am also one of the leaders of our sustainable and impact investing group.
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm excited to participate in this call. My name is Ted Benedict with Mckeon Investment Group. I've been in California for about 30 years after migrating from New Jersey. I've been in the investment industry for about 25 years and with Mckeon for about the past 14 years or so. I'm a consultant at the firm that works with 8 clients of various different client types across the spectrum, from endowments and foundations, pension funds, defined contribution funds. Mckeon is an employee-owned mid-sized investment consulting firm that consults on roughly $1.5 trillion in assets for about 210 clients of various types as well. And I was, I think, employee number 11 or 12 in our California office years ago. And now we're up to about 50 employees in Carlsbad, California. And so it's our 2nd largest office out of the 6 we have worldwide.
Great, thank you both. And earlier in the panel, it was mentioned that impact investing has taken off, and we certainly have experienced that. In my experience, it seems like the past year or 2, there's been a significant change in the commitment to impact investing, and of course, I'm using that as a catch-all phrase. But my question for you, Wendy, is how has Cambridge evolved with regard to researching and implementing impact strategies?
Sure. So it's been, we have likewise seen some pretty massive momentum, and just to put some numbers around that, over the past few years, In 2014, we had allocated $4.5 billion to impact and ESG strategies, and by the end of last year, that number had grown to over 10 billion. So just in a few years, more than doubling it. Going back a little bit, our dedicated team in this area was initially formalized back in 2008. It started with a few research individuals serving a core group of foundation clients who wanted to, as we heard earlier, activate more of the 95% corpus of their assets to better support that 5% grant payout each year. And our group was initially called Mission-Related Investing. Mike, you had asked about the name change. That initial name reflected our initial foundation client base, though more recently, as we wanted to reflect the ongoing growth of private clients, our endowment clients, and pension clients that have adopted these objectives, we've broadened our group name to Sustainable and Impact Investing. Part of the evolution has been structural internally. We've implemented some structural shifts in sort of team composition in terms of reporting lines, and also integrating ESG analysis across our full research platform. ESG analysis is now conducted as a standard part of our diligence on every manager across all asset classes, and that's whether or not a manager holds itself out as being focused on ESG and impact. Similarly, our assessment of a manager's diversity profile and practices is integrated across the entire platform as we're working to make change.
And Ted, same question?
Yes.
How has Mckeon evolved?
Sure thing. Mckeon's evolved quite a bit over the years, as the industry has, as we heard Cambridge has. I think since the mid 2000s, we've been assisting clients a lot in incorporating various impact and ESG and diversity principles into their investment policy statements. That's, I think, one of the initial cornerstones for just starting one of these efforts, along with solidifying your investment beliefs. So that's one point I think I would make here today for the audience is, there's a lot of definitions and a lot of facets to investments. And so, impact is not necessarily ESG, and that's not necessarily diversity. They are all independent arms of this effort. They do overlap and come together quite a bit. And so I think for each organization to define and understand what you're looking to achieve is a great starting spot. Mckeon has been trying to help clients solidify their investment beliefs for many years. I think it was in 2012 we started assigning ESG ratings to all of the investment strategies across all asset classes that we were underwriting for clients. And we as an organization for several years have been producing, I think since 2009, 2010, our own introspective corporate sustainability report, and also trying to promote and track our own diversity statistics as an organization and putting that out to several clients. And so I think we've grown with the industry as we've started working with more endowment and foundation clients. They have pushed us in this area and made us better as an organization, in my opinion, and so we continue to evolve.
And Ted, on that point, how are you engaging with your clients? Or do you have any recommendations for how your clients should engage with you to fulfill their impact objectives?
Yeah, I think to my comments earlier, I think the first set is just to establish a set of common investment beliefs and making that a codified document for the entire board. A lot of foundation and endowment boards have a variety of different trustees that are represented across industry that come together once a quarter, and they all come with preconceived investment notions, whether it's active versus passive, whether it's a program related investment is going to sacrifice an investment return, where I think helping them come together to establish a common set of beliefs is step one. And then incorporating those beliefs into your investment policy statement, and then establish a baseline. Conduct a survey of your various portfolio components and see where they stand today with regards to impact, ESG, diversity, and understand where you are today and set transparent goals on where you want to go. I think that's a great set of steps clients can take and ask consultants to assist along the way in doing that.
Okay, great. And Wendy, we'll shift to you. What are the key issues that your clients are talking about today?
Sure. So our clients broadly are implementing along two primary themes of environmental sustainability, or I should say categories of themes of environmental sustainability and social progress. I'd say what we are talking about with the most urgency over the past few months for fairly obvious reasons given the national discourse over this time period is racial equity. And I'd like to highlight a paper that's available on our public website called Racial Equity Investing, The Time Is Now. It's a paper we published a couple of months ago as an update to a 2018 report. We set forth our thesis that racial inequalities are a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions. Mark talked about the costs to society, but on the flip side, we are struck by the fact that investment strategies that can start to close some of these gaps, if the benefit is going to be that large to the economy, this means that there are investment opportunities embedded in closing these gaps. The papers distills for our clients our learnings and experiences and working with clients and really prioritizes three actionable steps. So one of them is in making racial equity an investment priority and codifying it in the investment policy. And I think that sort of difficult process of having conversations about thorny topics around the table can be a difficult and iterative process, but in fact it's really, really important to make sure everyone has the same definitions in their mind, the way Ted said. Then also starting just to allocate capital to racial equity investments, and finally putting racial equity at the center of the investment selection process. And, I think even when a group, my experience has been, even when a group gets around the table and decides, let's say they want to explicitly carve out a part of their portfolio explicitly dedicated towards newer stage diverse managers, there's still a lot of nuances in there. So I would echo Ted's comments that it's very important to just have these discussions and codify it and memorialize it.
And I know both Mckeon and Cambridge have an OCIO discretionary business and pretty significant. So I guess a question to both of you, are you able to implement differently with those discretionary clients? And Ted, maybe why don't you take that first, and Wendy will follow.
Sure, I'll start, and Wendy can maybe pick up from where I leave off, because to us, I think OCIO or general consulting relationships, it's just a different service model. We are very flexible in our approach and client-centric in our approach to type of mandate. And so it depends on what you'd like to outsource. Essentially, if you want a more discretionary relationship where Mckeon handles subscription documents, sourcing managers, quick implementation, we can do that. In either scenario, I think the key is just strong communication between yourself and your consultant on what the end goal. And an OCIO model obviously lets you do a little bit quicker and more efficiently and potentially a little bit more tactically versus a GC model, a general consulting model. But in either case, I think we would be able to implement impact-related investments very effectively, and we do for both client types across our business. Wendy, anything
Sure. Yeah. Similarly, I would say we build bespoke portfolios, whether a client comes to us under an OCIO mandate or in a traditional advisory mandate. And the portfolio is just going to be tailored to their unique objectives on both the financial and the impact side. I work with OCIO clients that do have explicit impact guidelines and objectives. I also will confess that even in my OCIO clients that haven't explicitly codified their objectives, a lot of the strong ideas coming out of our manager research team may tap into some of these themes around environmental sustainability and social progress. So I have found that going back to a client and talking about, for example, a thematic water strategy that we've implemented in a couple of our OCIO clients, even though they hadn't explicitly targeted environmental benefits in their IPS, the stakeholders are pretty enthusiastic to hear about that, particularly in a state like California that has the problems we've been having with drought. You know, and I'd say in general, the approach to impact investing has been maybe more common, more similar between advisory and OCIO clients than different, because I'd say there's a pretty small minority of clients that have explicitly set policies around impact objectives, but a much larger percentage of clients that are deploying opportunistically as the links seem to be increasingly blurring between impact investing and conventional financial only investing, and in many cases where the impact themes are reinforcing the financial outcomes.
One other quick thing to add is I'd say with a discretionary relationship, sometimes you're able to execute on some alternative ideas and some co-investments that might have some quick required legal work and some tough hurdles for a non-discretionary client to go down that road. I'll note one of my one example of a very successful impact investment for a client was a co-investment in a clean power plant in a certain municipality. And so it had the ability to close on a direct investment to build a power plant that was going to retire a coal power plant, bring a clean burning natural gas power plant to the area that would create a ton of jobs for the labor union that was going to be investing. So it turned out to be great for the environment, great for employment for this union, and a great financial investment at the same time. Those don't come across every day. They're tough to source, but when you can find them, it's really rewarding. And I don't think we would have been able to get that done in a non-discretionary framework.
So in the spirit of taking collaboration to a new level, Mike Parembo cannot see the chats. And so I've been asked to speak out, to read the chat so that both of you can comment about it, Ted and Wendy. And I will let Mike add any editorial comments that he feels necessary. It's actually a long question, and we're getting close to the end of time, so I apologize for paraphrasing. This is from a trustee of a public pension plan. And this trustee is concerned about, like, how do you drive impact investing forward when even ESG considerations are being seen as a risk, when many people see them as an important factor in minimizing risk. So do we have any suggestions for trustees who are perhaps, and forgive me if I'm implying this, interested in moving their organizations to impact investing, but are meeting a lot of resistance?
Catherine?
Sure, I'm happy to take a stab there. So I think certainly in the current regulatory environment, there's a lot of concerns and well-founded concerns and perhaps a dampening effect on what many pension plans fiduciaries feel like they have the flexibility to consider. But we would argue that increasingly these topics of systemic income inequalities, particularly along racial lines, and the environmental risks of climate degradation These have a very strong basis in economics, and that strategies that address these problems, which are some of the most pressing problems that our society faces, that the economic rationale can play out through strong investment returns. So I think for many pension plan fiduciaries, it's really going to be a matter of exploring these themes from the viewpoint of improving risk-adjusted returns, rather than I think the term is ancillary benefits, seeking ancillary benefits in the form of impact.
Yeah,
Ted may have more. Yeah.
I think that's a great opening, Wendy. And I would just refer back to Mark's comment a little bit earlier. I mean, we're living in a low yield environment where treasuries are yielding close to zero across several maturities across the spectrum. And I think the yield today on the Barclays aggregate bond, a core component in any public pension plan portfolio, is about 1.2, 1.3% today. So looking at an impact bond strategy like we're talking about today, or other types of lending strategies that can potentially have an impact to small businesses, you're going to get a yield advantage, a return advantage, and potentially some diversification by incorporating things like that. And I think that would be pretty acceptable to a lot of boards.
So don't be discouraged is the message.
And Ted and Wendy, I think that's all the time we have, unfortunately, for our panel. I think we all know that we can continue this conversation for hours and hours. So, and we hope to do so. If anyone in the audience has questions, we will follow up with you. Ted and Wendy will make themselves available. But in the interest of time, I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Ron Homer. Ron is the Chief Strategist in our Impact Investing Group. He co-founded RBC's Access Capital strategy over 20 years ago, and has spent his career in various community investment roles. So Ron, if you can hear me, please take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And it's a great transition to our chat. First, I want to mention I'm glad this is a Zoom chat, not a fireside chat, given the Creek fires and what's happening in California. But I think the question that came up about public funds, Nathan Maxit. I met Nathan a little over 2 years ago. He's the chairman of the board of trustees of the Fresno County Employee Retirement Association. So Nathan, perhaps you can both give a little bit of background on FACERA, on the county association, your background, and how you came to answer the question posed by the former questionnaire.
Sure. So a couple quick things. You mentioned the Creek fire here in California. Believe it or not, that fire is burning in my district. So I'm on the board of supervisors as well. I represent all of eastern Fresno County. And as you know, the Creek fire is burning both in Fresno County and Madera County. So lots of prayers sent to not only California, but our Central Valley region are greatly appreciated. But as far as my background, I am on the board of supervisors. I'm also the chair of the Fresno County Employees Retirement Association. I spent 10 years as an affordable housing developer working with a nonprofit here in the Central Valley called the Coalition for Urban Renewal Excellence. And then after that, I worked for a community action agency called Fresno EOC. I was in charge of all construction operations for that corporation, as well as running all their energy programs. I've worked with cap and trade funds that have come through the state of California, creating new programs that have operated statewide with the California Department of Community Services and Development, and spent 16 years as a council member, mayor twice in the city of Clovis, worked for the state legislature in the late 90s up until 2002, and was elected to the Board of Supervisors in 2016. And I serve on a number of committees. I'm chair of the audit committee here, and serve on Airport Land Use Commission and about 18 other committees. But the Fresno County Employee Retirement Association is what is known as it was founded under the 1937 Act. So there are 20 counties in California that basically manage their own pension systems, and Fresno County is one of those. Our board consists of 9 trustees the Board of Supervisors appoints 4 of those trustees. Another 4 are elected, and then there is 1 representative who's the auditor, controller, tax collector of the county, who automatically has a seat on that board. So FSARA currently manages about $5 billion. We have fund managers that invest our $5 billion all around the world. And a few years ago, our board had an internal discussion about, you know, we have all these assets and we need to make sure that we have retirement proceeds enough for the roughly 20,000 members who are going to be receiving benefits or are currently receiving benefits. Is there a way that we can get a double or triple benefit out of some of our investments? And so we asked our consultant, who is Veris, to go out and let us know what vehicles were out there where that we could use, where we could make an investment that would, where maybe we could take some of our allocation out of another fixed income vehicle we had, allocate to a new fixed income vehicle that would do direct lending or create liquidity in Fresno County. For those of you on the call who aren't aware, Fresno County, many of our cities in Fresno County are considered disadvantaged. Just looking at incomes in Fresno County, they're much lower than the state average. When it comes to diversity, we're probably one of the most diverse counties in the entire state. We have refugee groups here, a very large Hmong population. I want to say that in Fresno County, there's like 400 different languages that are spoken. So very, very diverse. And so RBC was brought to our board, and our board vetted them, and we decided to make a $50 million allocation, which is roughly 1% of our fund, for them to go out and create liquidity in the Fresno County marketplace, both for affordable housing, single family, multifamily, and also for businesses, small businesses that kind of needed capital to get going. So I've been very pleased with RBC. We started with them, I want to say in 2018, and within the first year of their operation, they returned over 8% annualized, which was fantastic. And part of the reason for that is just that the market was right for that. And 2, when we entered the liquidity crisis globally because of COVID and the markets screeching to a halt, and the Fed's, of course, cutting interest rates, it allowed for another huge bump in RBC's investments, since all of the mortgages that they had purchased really buoyed our portfolio. In the first quarter, information I received back, where most of Fresno County's investments had lost money, RBC actually showed, I think, a 2% gain or 2.5% gain for that quarter. And so I can remember making some comments to the media about how when we first got involved with RBC, our expectation was for them to make right around 3.5% to 4% annualized. But ever since we had invested with them, they had exceeded that expectation because of the market. But really, we're getting a double and triple benefit, getting a return to those individuals who are going to be retiring under our program, but also low-income families who otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to afford a home are having an opportunity to own homes, start up businesses, and to me, it was a win-win scenario.
Thank you. So you mentioned there's 9 trustees. You had a background that lent itself to understand what some of the opportunities and issues were. Were all of your trustees unanimous in their support, and where are they now?
Yeah, so our trustees were unanimous in the support, and when we did our initial allocation, we felt that, you know, right around that $50 million mark was such that it didn't put too much of our assets at risk, and also that that would be enough to make a significant impact. But just to say, a few months ago, when we hit that liquidity crisis, our board decided that it would be a good idea for us to actually give RBC a little bit more money. And so we are now up to, I think, $57 million that RBC has to operate with. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say with that fund that we're using, which you have created, I want to say that Fresno County is one of the top funds, retirement funds that is participating in your vehicle. And we've been pleasantly surprised so far.
And we appreciate the partnership. So you mentioned in California there are I forget the number, 27 or other counties that manage their own funds.
Of 20 that are 1937 Act counties. Yeah, 20 other counties.
So have you seen any interest from some of the other county funds, and as well as we have on this panel and on the call a number of community foundations. Have others in your community recognized the investment and followed?
You know, I would say that I think all counties are very interested in doing more community investing. Affordable, our governor has recognized the need to build 3 million housing units in California alone over the course, you know, of the next, right now, about 6 years. And so how can we take assets that we have right here at our disposal and not expose those assets to more risk, but begin to identify vehicles where we can build more infrastructure, where we can build more housing. So I'm seeing more and more trustees getting very interested in this space.
Very good. So you mentioned the effect of the wildfires, but also and the demographics of Fresno. How has your county been affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic, and what needs do you see coming out of the dual threats?
Well, so the Creek Fire is now the largest single fire in the state's history. While there are other fires that have burned larger areas, those have been fires that kind of have multiple fires that have merged together. The Creek Fire is one fire that started about 26 days ago, and it's burned 307,000 acres as of this morning. So it's destroyed about 850 housing units, many of which we have low-income families who lived in some of these housing units who didn't even have insurance. So I'm working right now, both wearing my supervisor hat and then with some of the work that I've been involved with other nonprofit organizations, working to find ways where we can wrap services around these families that are gonna need it most. To your question about COVID-19, because so many businesses, small businesses, have been deemed non-essential, there are some that have gone out of business. There are some that are hanging on by a thread. I think about nail salons, beauty salons, restaurants, and these are the backbone of our economy here locally. And so how can a fund like RBC be involved in all of this? Really, access to capital is critical to entrepreneurs right now. And so businesses, as we begin to come out of COVID-19, if they don't have that access to capital, that could be the nail in the coffin, which doesn't allow them to grow out of this catastrophe that we've experienced here locally in the form of COVID-19. But now with the Creek Fire on top of that, it just adds another layer of complexity. And again, the need for a fund like RBC's, which is operating here, is now more important than ever.
Yeah. So when you mentioned the impact of fires, some businesses not having insurance, not being essential, closed down, sounds like an awful lot of risk. And anyone thinking, should I go to Fresno and make an investment? It almost sounds counterintuitive. Can you talk a little bit about the role of government loan programs and the government guarantee, and how your capital ties into that?
Yeah, so as far as risk is concerned, again, with how RBC is operating, is they're going out and purchasing loans that are being made by local banks, by CDFIs, community development financial institutions, who are doing the underwriting. And it's not that RBC is taking on more risk, but by them going out and buying these loans that are being made, they're allowing other entities to do the underwriting, identify and measure that risk, make those loans, but then freeing up the ability of these local banks to be able to make new loans again. And so really it's not risky. But I can talk about a lot of the projects that I've seen RBC invest in. Housing Authority here locally, they get involved in affordable housing projects, but there might be a component of financing that they need, which is missing to make a project come out of the ground. And so RBC can step in and provide some of that bridge financing to make that project work. And so where the federal government too is going to be helpful, obviously we have a disaster We're looking to get some individual assistance from FEMA. So if, we believe that FEMA will be here assisting in the rebuilding process, and you have loans that are guaranteed at the federal level too, in many cases, especially when you're dealing with affordable housing or loans that are going out to small businesses in disadvantaged areas. So I have not seen a higher level of risk by the vehicle that's been created through RBC. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but that's just been my experience thus far.
Well, there was a method behind my question. 2/3 of the Barclays Act is made up of government guaranteed instruments, whether it's treasuries, agencies, CMBS, and there are a number of government loan programs that feed in to those benchmarks. But we recently, particularly over the last couple of months, with a focus on how much money is actually going into low-income communities and going into particularly African-American and Hispanic communities. It's interesting, these programs were designed to help attract and protect capital into areas of need. And for example, in the SBA program, only 2% of all the SBA loans made prior to COVID-19 went to minority firms, Latino or African American. If you look at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they do a tremendous amount of business. Probably 2/3 of all the mortgages made in the country, at least by numbers, are Fannie and Freddie guaranteed. And another good portion is Ginnie Mae, and they represent the amount of those loans that are going into Black and Latino areas is way out of line in terms of below the benchmark, even if you just took income, even if you adjusted for income and demographics. So I think one of the things that the county has done, and one of the things that investors who invest in things like the Access Capital or Impact Bond, is by creating these pools of capital that are dedicated and targeted to those communities. It's a way for us to interact with organizations, whether they be existing and large institutions, pay more attention to these communities, or to work with smaller institutions who don't have necessarily the capital, but to the extent that they learn how to take advantage of the secondary market, they could turn that capital over and over. So we thank you for being a pioneer in California in this initiative. Just as we manage money for future generations, for your retirees or for future grants, we need to make sure that the environment that we're passing on, both societal and environmental, are just as protected as the assets we try to manage. So we think that our partnership's a good example of trying to do both. So I think I was told we in 2 minutes before. I think we're just at the 2-minute mark. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Debbie. Also, before I turn it over, I'd like to thank her and the San Diego Grantmakers Association for partnering with us and for bringing us all together today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ron, and to each and every one of you for sharing in this conversation today. It has been fascinating, and I can see by the wealth of questions that have come in that there's deep interest in learning even more. So we promise that we'll be back to you. We did get a question in the conversation in the chat about, so like, what will the collaborative do? And I responded back, but I'll just mention here, we were really waiting to ascertain how much interest there was going to be. So we wanted to wait until this program took place. I think we have our answer. There's a great deal of interest. People not only who are leading, but who are also seeking to learn from each other as we continue to try and maximize impact. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos to help close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. And I just want to echo what Debbie shared. Gratitude to our speakers and to all of you who attended today. I hope you gleaned as much valuable information as I did, and we're going to close out with an evaluation poll that my colleague Melissa is going to share on the screen. And this is just a friendly reminder, if you could please take just a few minutes to complete the poll, because that data will be incredibly helpful as we grow and evolve our programming and we prepare for the future. So I thank you for your time, and I thank everyone again for participating. And then Melissa will have that up momentarily.